Well, when time runs out, as I mentioned before, the Our Lady herself said that entire nations will be annihilated. She said, to use her own words, "If my requests are not granted, Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, raising up wars and persecutions against the Church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, various nations will be annihilated." And so we see that already the Church is being persecuted for standing up. There are people who say, for example, that we're being discriminating because we are against a woman being ordained for the priesthood. It should be free. The fact is, the faith tells us otherwise. We have to obey God rather than men. But some men think that because they've been elected, quote unquote, democratically, that they can command everybody, including God. And so for those who don't go along with it, and if you want to save your souls, you can't go along with people telling you to commit sin, then there will be persecution. We already see that, for example, in the United States, for example, the land of the free, so they tell us. But the fact is that the Catholic Church is being told that they must provide contraceptives and abortifacients for their workers. Now, here you are, it's against the law of God, as taught in the Bible, it's taught in the Catholic Church's teaching for 2,000 years, and yet we have the government of the United States saying to the Catholic Church officials, you must pay for these instruments of either killing their babies or instruments of contraception. The whole point of that is that they're being forced to sin, otherwise they will be heavily fined and close down their work. So at the end of the day, the persecution has already begun. Even the fact that they're not only threatening it, allegedly it's in law. Of course, when you speak about law, law is not just what is passed by legislation, but law, as St. Thomas points out, is the ordination of reason. That is, it has to be reasonable. If law is not reasonable, then it cannot be law by definition. Law has to be for the common good. If the law is going to send souls to hell, then it's not for the common good. So law has to be reasonable for the common good, which is promulgated by one in authority. But just because the one's in authority, he can't go beyond the jurisdiction. So in short, the law that says that you have to provide these instruments of death, abortion, and so forth against the law of God is no law at all. However, for those people who think that it is law, they're going to persecute those who know better to save their souls. So yes, there will be persecution, and it's already started. It's not just, of course, the United States, it's around the world, because the people in charge are following the teachings of Satan, that is, the teachings of Masonry, to enforce so-called laws against Christianity, because they want to wipe out Christianity and Christendom. They're its mortal enemies, as they themselves say in their own writings over and over again. I'm not sure if I remember all the rest of the question, please.
What happens when time runs out?
So when time runs out, there will be persecution of the faithful. When time runs out, but that's just the beginning. Then we have the good will be martyred. So the persecution will not stop with just fines and imprisonment. Eventually, it will go to martyrdom, just as we've seen in the time of the Romans. At first, they would like, well, we're tolerant, we're going to, well, but when it becomes too much of a reproach to their conscience, then that will turn eventually to martyrdom. As soon as the propaganda machine is more and more believed that their war really is against Christians, against Catholics, is against those who believe in the Bible. Even, I think people like Hillary Clinton, or I may have the wrong person, but various high officials in the U.S. government have already declared in private that the terrorists are those who believe in the Bible, take the Bible literally, for example, or those, if one of the crimes that is if you store food, because you can see that there's going to be a shortage in a few years' time or something like that, even that's considered an act of terrorism or some sort of psychological problem that you have. These things are there for people to read if they would just look at them. So, persecution of the Church, persecution of the good will be martyred, the Holy Father much to suffer, various nations will be annihilated. Already we see that the whole world has enough atom bombs, nuclear weapons, all kinds of advanced machinery to kill all the population of the whole world many, many times over. And this is what we're told in the message of Fatima is going to take place. Entire nations will be annihilated if the consecration is not done in time.
Can we afford to ignore the reality of our situation?
There are people who think that if I don't think about this, these are unpleasant subjects. I mean, why would we want to talk about these things if we're just, first of all, I would say two things. There is hope Our Lady promises that in the end, her Immaculate Heart will triumph. Those who survive will see a great victory for God and for good. But the problem is, for most of us, is that we will not survive this. So it's important for us to, first of all, think, and we don't know which ones are going to survive. We do know that nations will be annihilated, but one of them will not be Russia, because Russia will eventually be converted. But yet we know that, that for example, the United States is targeted in 10 minutes. If they're not got their weapons of destruction on the United States, they can turn them there in 10 minutes, as a matter is a known fact. And it's already taken place even in the 90s. That's another story. But I need the question again.
Can we afford to ignore the reality of our situation?
So, as I mentioned, it's hard for us to, we'd rather not think about these subjects because there's more pleasant things to think about. But if we don't think about it, it's not going to make the problem going to go away. There's a time limit. We see already, not that we should have to wait to see the signs of it, but for those who are far enough seeing, they can see the signs not too far away, even in the next few years, maybe even closer, that we could have World War III. Not thinking about it is not going to change the reality. So if you want to feel pleasant today, you can perhaps put it out of your mind. But ignoring it is not going to save the situation. Ignoring it is only going to make it worse, because just like if you have a child, for example, the child, you don't want the child to hurt himself. The child doesn't want to hurt himself, but the child doesn't have any experience. If he puts his hand on a burner, on the stove, he's going to hurt himself. And so we have to raise our voice and say, don't do that. And if the child doesn't understand it all, then the child will say, we have to be somewhat forceful with them. Pay attention to what I'm saying. And so the same thing, if you're driving your car and you don't pay attention, if you take your hands off the wheel, or if you just decide to drive full speed ahead, no matter who's in front of you, obviously you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to hurt other people too. By ignoring the reality is not going to help us. So we have to look at the issues, look at the reality, and that's what we're trying to do with this program here.
What are some of the facts to demonstrate that you are not exaggerating?
I mentioned before that the world has enough weapons of mass destruction to kill the whole of mankind many times over. There are more than 7 billion people living in the world today, and we have enough atom bombs and other kinds of weapons to kill every one of the 7 billion people, not once, not twice, but many times. So, is it an exaggeration? Those are facts. Anyone can check them out. The second thing is, many people don't know, but the major cities of the world, major capitals of the world, such as Washington, Moscow, London, Rome, those are 4 I know, are targeted by at least one country, if not more than one, who have got nuclear weapons. People don't realize how many countries do have nuclear weapons. There certainly is the United States, there's Russia, there's China, there's Israel. Many people don't know that, but Israel also has nuclear weapons. There's France, there's Great Britain, to mention some. And of course, we mentioned North Korea. And Pakistan for that matter, and India. And so it's not just that one country, and only one country, has these nuclear weapons, and we can depend upon one country to maintain a rationality. I don't think, first of all, we can depend on any country to maintain rationality. Years ago, it was the doctrine of only in retaliation. Now the doctrine is being used to say, well, we might need to use it as a first strike. I mean, up until a few years ago, in the Treaty of Westphalia, I think it was 1555, said unless you have proof positive that if another nation has intentions of aggression against your nation, you cannot attack them. And similarly, but today under the Bush doctrine says, well, we think you're going to attack us, so we're going to attack you first. That's the attack on Iraq the second time. And when it was proven later that they had no weapons of mass destruction, nevertheless, there's no apology, no restitution, no nothing, but we've crossed in our thinking, I'm not talking about yours and my thinking, but in the thinking of the leaders of the world, they've changed from we will not attack unless we have proof positive. Now on suspicion we'll attack. Well, just think if I went into a town or anyone else went into a town and they say, well, you're looking badly at me, I'm going to shoot you first before you kill me. I mean, if we do that, it's a formula for killing all mankind. But yet this is the kind of thinking that passes for intelligence at the highest levels since George Bush made the Bush Doctrine. That's crazy. So is there danger of this destruction going on? Absolutely. Can you depend on any world leader to not have this power go to his head? No, we can't, not without the grace of God. It's important for us to realize that the message of Fatima is real. It applies to us. We better take it seriously because there is no other solution. In another program, I'll point out that there's no other solution to the crisis the world is facing. And not just for war, also for the financial meltdown about to come. Remember to pray the rosary every day. That you can do, and petition the Pope to do the consecration of Russia. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.